sometimes fences just stand in the way of getting what you want. And I think of goats at a petting zoo. You know how it is where they'll press their face into like the smallest opening and even just stretch out their tongue, pleading to get some morsel of food as you walk by. And that would make sense if it was the only source of food they had, but lots of times there's a whole abundant supply of feed waiting for them in the middle of the pen. And yet they still press up to the side. And so you have to wonder what goes on in that little goat brain. I mean, do they think that the best treats are always outside? Are they bored with the food they have? Do they crave more excitement? Do they see the fence as an unreasonable restriction of their freedom? Do they think the farmer is cruelly holding them back from something better? Right? They're just goats. I assume they don't think that way, but those are the ways that we as human beings often respond to the boundaries that God sets for us in his commands. Of course, the serpent reasoned with Eve that way in the Garden of Eden. The Lord had forbidden Adam and Eve from eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, but Genesis 3:4-6 tells us, "But the serpent said to the woman, 'You'll not surely die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be like God, knowing good and evil.' And it says, 'So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate, and she also gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate.'" Of course, the consequences of that distorted logic were disastrous. Adam and Eve immediately begin to experience guilt and fear. Conflict, pain, sorrow, and death all become part of their existence. And worst of all, they're cut off from the presence of God. And so as their descendants, we all live under that curse. And so you would think that we would know better, but we still fall prey to that same foolish reasoning when we think about God's commands. I mean, even if we stop short of the line of crossing it, we often maybe act like those goats, pressing the boundaries as far as we can, particularly when it comes to biblical teaching about sex and marriage. Now, as I said, today we're looking at Matthew 5:27-32, and it tells us how Jesus confronts this problem in his Sermon on the Mount, which runs from chapter 5 through chapter 7. And I think Jesus leads us here to see that we all have adulterous hearts. In our self-righteous pride, it might lead us to reject that or to resist acknowledging that, but admitting it's the only way for us to truly overcome it. Because only then will we look to Jesus as the one who fulfills the law for us and enables us to change. And so we'll see in this passage, he leads us through 3 steps toward overcoming our adulterous hearts, just as he did in the previous passage with the prohibition of murder. And so we'll follow the same basic outline. We need to recall the limitation biblically, to grasp its implication, and to adopt the application. And so Jesus starts with the 7th commandment. He recalls the limitation of adultery.